The number one thing that every board is asking themselves right now is, how do I get the most value out of this new generative AI thing that's hit the market since November 22, when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene? What does this do for my business? What does this do for my strategy? And I think it's caught a lot of CTOs napping in terms of their technical strategy.
Today's guest, Jed Griffiths, is the Chief Digital Officer at Microsoft, where he helps businesses harness the power of AI through human-centered innovation. So, for people who don't use Copilot, just tell us a little bit about what it is, what it does.
It's an AI companion that gets to know you, your context in the workplace, documents you access, people you collaborate with, and it helps accelerate your day. Organizations need to then, from a top-down perspective, have a clear strategy for what they want to do with AI. Over the last few years, moving into Microsoft and seeing what's happened with AI, spending a lot of time with large enterprises, with startups that need to make sure that everything's operating as it should. I spent sort of 19, 20 years or so in nuclear defense.
Give us a quick heads up what you were doing before.
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Come on, tell me.
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who have bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture.
Well, today on All About Business, I'm really delighted to welcome Jed Griffiths. One or two people have said, can we have someone from a really big company who knows a lot of stuff? And I think I've delivered today, or the team certainly has, because Jed, he comes from Microsoft, which is the most valuable company in the world at the moment. And he's the Chief Digital Officer for the UK, Microsoft UK. And Jed is also a scientist, a proper scientist. He's a physicist. And we're going to be exploring what Microsoft is doing in the world of AI, his views on startups. I'm going to try and get some information out of him about his time at the Atomic Weapons Institute, but he's been pretty cagey in the warm-up, and we'll see what we can learn. But I know it's going to be a lot. So thank you very much, Jed, for coming in this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, looking forward to sharing some insights.
Let's just begin. What do you see in the sort of tech landscape at the moment? What's going on out there? What should we be really paying attention to?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually the number one question I get asked by pretty much every executive board or senior leader I speak to these days. So in my day-to-day role, I spend a lot of time talking to companies from different sectors, sort of various sizes, but mainly enterprises. And the number one thing that every board is asking themselves right now is, how do I get the most value out of this new generative AI thing that's hit the market? Because if you look at what's happened since November 22, when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene, millions of users in a matter of weeks, pretty much every board is now asking the question, what does this do for my business? What does this do for my strategy? And I think it's caught a lot of CTOs napping in terms of their technical strategy. And so a lot of businesses are pivoting. So the number one thing is, how do I make the most of AI?
You said how important it is for a company to have an AI strategy. How do they go about that? What does an AI strategy look like in your view?
It's very important, I think. And there are a number of components. It's easy to say AI strategy, but to make it actionable, let's turn that into things. So the first one really is to make sure that you've got a really clear business alignment to, why are you going to use AI, right? So where are we going to use this technology, rather than just sort of spin up some pilots and not really make the most of them? How are you actually going to leverage AI to provide, real business value? And that's really, really important, because it's not cheap necessarily to go and put AI everywhere in your business, and you need to make sure that you're doing it in the right parts. The second thing then that comes very quickly after that is making sure that you've got a really good perhaps technology and data strategy that underpins that. And what I mean by that really is, data is the fuel for AI. So if you've got poor data, then the AI you put over the top of that data won't be that great. Okay, you won't get the great outcomes. So you need to make sure that you've got, the right data, that data is governable, that it's accessible, usable by people. That really fuels and gets better AI outcomes. And then I think for entrepreneurs, and where they perhaps have a benefit over some of the more incumbent businesses, is that they tend to be what we call digital native or cloud first businesses. So they don't necessarily have this technical debt from years of operating. They're able to sort of have that proposition and very quickly, move to perhaps a cloud platform and get the most of the benefits of cloud to scale, right? So they have that technology platform. And that's really, really important, because it allows them to to expand quickly, the scalability of cloud, serve lots of people, and if you're building an application, whatever it might be. But also it allows you to leverage the improvements in AI. So you're not having to do so much of this kind of infrastructure estate maintenance yourself. You're able to make the most of like new models and new capabilities as they come out, and then build on a platform. And Microsoft, that platform for us is our Azure Foundry platform, which allows you to get the most of AI quickly. And then two other components of that AI strategy is what we've talked about, which is the AI governance and ethics, which is very, very important. Making sure that you will know where you want to and not want to use AI, and you'll be transparent with your customers as well, where you're infusing AI in that product or service. Finally, I guess part of your strategy is your skilling, is your people, of course. How are you giving people the right skills and tools that they need to use these capabilities to grow as this technology is moving so quickly? How do they learn about AI and how do they keep current?
It's interesting thinking about our business. We've been around in business for quite a long time, so we've got a lot of data. But we've probably got some legacy tech, so we might be in that camp. If you're a new startup, you can put all the new cloud stuff in place, but you haven't got the data.
Right.
Who's going to win? It's sort of interesting.
So I
suppose you want to put the data into a new cloud situation if you can.
Yeah. So I love that. Actually, it's really good because there's this viewpoint, I think, with a lot of founders I speak to, that they're out to, build a product and disrupt a market and go, and some do, right? We have unicorns that eventually reach that status of being very disruptive and creating a strong following quickly. But actually many startups don't go there that quickly. And actually, one of the things that I would recommend is don't necessarily discount the kind of the big incumbents, right? Maybe you need to partner with them because, as you say, they've got the existing client base, they've got the knowledge within the sector. You might have a great product and a great disruptive, avenue in that sector, wherever it might be, but perhaps you need that big incumbent to work with you on something. Maybe there's a partnership there, right? And there's mutual value. So never discount as a founder, you've got that strong vision, that vision to be disruptive, but sometimes the partnership angle might be the one to go down. And actually in lots of enterprises I talk to, many of them now are trying to be intrapreneurs, right? So they've got this viewpoint that they want to disrupt themselves. And so there could be a natural partnership there looking to work with startups and do it together.
I think that's really interesting and a huge opportunity for everyone, actually.
Absolutely. Everyone benefits. Right?
Yeah. That's right in your sort of crosshairs, isn't it? That's what your job is about, helping businesses do that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So my role at Microsoft really is to bring the sort of the breadth of Microsoft of what we have in the UK from our products and services. You might have heard about Copilot. Obviously we've made a lot of those, but you use Copilot. That's fantastic. Yeah. So Copilot, but also our data and AI services, and then even in some of our more innovative sort of products and services that you can access through Microsoft. But it's to bring that whole plethora of capabilities to an organization to say, how can we help you innovate and change and create new value for your organization?
If, like me, you run a business or manage a team, you'll know how important it is to hire great people. Over the last 65 years, Reed has worked with thousands of businesses around the world, helping them to recruit and to grow. This is what inspired us to create Reed.ai, your new AI hiring agent. It's here to save you money, to save you time, and to help you get the right match. Whether you're hiring your first team member or your 50th, Reed AI is here to make it easier. Try it free for 28 days, exclusively available during our beta period. Go to Reed.ai and get started. Reed.ai, your higher power.
So for people who don't use Copilot, just tell us a little bit about what it is, what it does.
Well, in a line, I love this piece of marketing, actually. It's we call it the UI for AI. So it's the new user interface for AI. And Copilot's it's your companion. It's an AI companion that gets to know you, your context in the workplace, documents you access, people you collaborate with. And then it allows you to have a natural language. You can even talk to it, right? You can just converse with this tool in a way that you would an employee. And then it reaches out into your digital library, the files you have access to, emails you've sent, Teams messages you have. And it helps accelerate your day, right? So it can sort of summarize documents that you've been sent recently. It can look at your calendar and help you prioritize your week. It can summarize your emails with you in sort of Outlook and really help you, respond to long, complicated email chains without having to read through them. So it's really your companion for sort of the modern workplace.
What I was thinking was like assistant in a way, but everyone has an assistant now with Copilot.
That's right.
So is this making us all much more productive?
Well, that is the aim. So there's two things that's really
still
good.
An aim, is
yeah,
it?
that's still the
so
aim.
What's going on there? Because people saying, we're not more productive, we're actually less productive, especially the public sector gets blamed for this. So what's going on? Why is that not?
Well, a little bit of a personal point on this one. I really don't like the term productivity. I think not many industries really quantify what that means for them, right? So if we look at maybe...
You don't like it because it's not quantified, or because
I don't think organizations...
Like the concept?
Yeah, I don't think organizations quantify productivity well.
I don't know what it means.
Right. So if you've got a bunch of job roles and they're using Copilot and they're getting time back, that's great, right? That's great from a personal productivity perspective. I get maybe half an hour, maybe more back by using these tools. And what you do with that time, you might choose to invest in a bit of learning. You might take on that stretch project you never had time to do before. And that's great from a personal productivity perspective. But when you look at the organizational productivity, that might be slightly different. And I think the challenge is for organizations to think about, can we quantify what this extra time back means for us as a business? What are we going to do with that? Does that mean that we change our processes in some way, or do we give back to the employee experience of the well-being? I see organizations saying, look, you can have that time back, right? Invest in that as you will.
But you could just go home early?
Well, I don't know.
Is that part of it? No, maybe that's what people want to do. I
mean,
if they've done the work, I suppose it's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, but it all comes down to what this hangs off really is your organizational strategy. So how you're going to use AI and how it's supercharging both that personal productivity, but also adding organizational productivity. Is it changing the fundamental processes of how you do your work and how how your business gets paid?
So if you're running an organization, if you're a manager or a CEO, or you're running a team of people, you should be thinking about that, you're saying.
Oh yeah.
These people are going to have a bit more time because of these new tools. How can we most productively use that time?
Absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's essential. And that's for sort of two reasons. One, it helps with the adoption. It's going to help people understand why they should use a tool like Copilot. Why should they sort of invest in learning about AI skills and how to prompt? Many people would have heard about prompt engineering or, writing good quality prompts. How do I get the most out of this tool? Both to give me that personal productivity, but also then to be more creative for the business, to think about new avenues of maybe revenue generation or new growth, whatever it might be. And I think that's the transition point then. Organizations need to then, from a top-down perspective, have a clear strategy for what they want to do with AI. I think that's the key. A lot of organizations are sort of stuck in neutral and trying to scale their AI pilots, and it's because they don't have a clear strategy for what they actually want to do with AI.
We had two young entrepreneurs in the podcast studio a few weeks ago, Richard and Archie Hollingsworth, and they've developed an AI assistant. It's called Fixer. They were telling us about it. And they'd actually gone to America and been sort of encouraged and cajoled and sort of boosted in all sorts of ways by that experience. But they've just raised $10 million for this venture, which is about 5 people, I think, at the moment. So and one of the things they said, and I want to test this with you, is that they think 2025 is the year where you're going to see a lot more AI startups. We've been talking about companies and how they deploy it, but new businesses coming into the scene with new offerings. Is that something you're seeing, or as Microsoft, because you'd be at the forefront because you'd be supplying them the tech? Yeah,
I think that's absolutely true. We're seeing that number increase. I mean, we have at Microsoft, we have a Microsoft for Startups program that helps people, build with our platform and build these new, exciting, differentiated AI solutions. But yes, they're on the increase. I think the UK is a great place to be a tech startup. People are looking at this technology and looking for avenues to disrupt incumbent businesses. Think about new business models, new ways of bringing data together in exciting ways to create new services or new products. So I think it's a really vibrant. It's definitely a vibrant scene around AI.
Do you think the UK is a good place then to do this?
The UK's got a really high propensity for sort of creativity and innovation. So if you look at some of the benchmarks and metrics over the years in terms of IP, we're right up there, I think, in the top 3 or top 5 countries in terms of IP generation. Our education system is really, really good. We attract talent into zones like London and Manchester, particularly where there's a strong concentration of technical and digital skills. So I think it's a good place. It's got good networks. It's good infrastructure. So it's a good place to begin a startup.
So it's like a cluster effect where you get lots of people coming together.
Yeah,
I suppose in London from all over the world, really.
Yeah, exactly right. The UK has this reputation, but then I think the challenge might be scaling. So perhaps in a lot of the conversations I've had over the years with technology startups, or before joining Microsoft, I've done a lot with the Institute of Physics in supporting more deep tech or physics-based startups. The challenge has always been scaling. So getting that sort of seed funding and accelerator funding or working with networks to get you going, that's one thing. And that's, you can do that relatively easy in the UK. The challenge is, how do you move from technology or initial sort of technology focused offering into a much more product-based offering where you can get over the the traditional valley of death, right? Where you have
the valley of death.
Valley of death.
That sounds bad.
It does sound bad, doesn't it?
So how do you get through the valley of death? Come on, tell me.
Yeah.
You need to know this.
Yeah, right. So the valley of death really is where you have your initial sort of your minimal viable product, right? So you've done your initial prototyping, you've got your initial perhaps product, but you need to scale, right? You need to sort of reach new markets. You need to get recurring revenue.
You need to sell it to some people.
Exactly, right. You need to start getting some market penetration, for various reasons, either it's cash flow reasons or, especially in deep tech, you see this where your product is tangible, where you're building a physical thing. That's much tougher, right? Because you've got to go and manufacture that. Then you need to distribute that. Maybe you're a biomedical devices supplier, or, you've got a great new handheld kit for the GP surgery. That's going to be hard, right? That's a regulated industry. So there are going to be some delays and some challenges to getting that product out to the market and penetrating the market. And if those challenges are too great to surmount, then you end up falling into the valley of death, where the funding doesn't support you to really reach that scale and really penetrate and sell into the market you're looking for.
So there's a lot in this valley that can kill you by the sound of things. But I mean, two things that struck me when you were saying that. One is that there's maybe not a hinterland of manufacturing and design capacity that you can go and get new things made at a volume quickly. And the other, maybe there isn't the money. Is that a fair summary of that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there was a great report that came out around venture capital in physics that the Institute of Physics published recently, which is a pretty good read and talks about some of these barriers. But one in particular is, for deep tech especially, I talked about these, you see this a lot more.
What do you mean by deep tech? Explain.
So deep tech would be science-based startups, right? Where you're infusing some kind of digital AI or technology product with a physical product. So it might be some kind of augmented reality or virtual reality, or it might be drone technology or automotive technology or, quantum. It's something that relies on a physics or chemistry or some kind of engineering principle or IP that then is scaled through some product, right? That's how I see deep tech. And the challenge there, of course, is a lot of your costs will be in extended sort of research and development cycles. So when you think about, if you perhaps contrast that with maybe a fintech or a finance tech business, then it's predominantly software based, and the thresholds for moving from that Series A to Series B and getting your funding they're very well quantified, and your revenue can come quite quickly. You can go to market quite quickly. As a deep tech, as an R&D with that long R&D cycle, you're still looking for funding as you're refining your product and you're seeking new markets and you're looking to expand. So you
need very patient investors.
Definitely.
Who know what they're doing.
Yeah, and investors who really understand what the commercialization routes are for deep tech products as opposed to more traditional.
And there's a shortage of them in the UK, is that the case?
I don't know if there's a shortage. I just think perhaps from some of the sort of anecdotes from speaking to startups in this space and some of the the reports I've read, things like Bohurst and PitchBook and the recent government papers that have been issued around this, say that there's an issue. There's a number of factors, but there's something we're not quite getting right in the UK to really maximize on that scaling factor for some of this technology.
So what happens then? So these new businesses are heading off and they get to this place, the valley of death, as you call it. What happens? Do they sell out? Do they go bust or accommodate? I mean, do these entrepreneurs get out too soon? What's the sort of outcome of this?
Well, I think all too often they collapse, right? They're unable to sustain.
Disappear.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know that.
But there's a sort of Darwinism about that as well, isn't there? You might not have been a very good idea.
Well, potentially, and I think that's
one
of the.
That might be killing good ideas as well.
Well, it could be, and I think that's right. I couldn't say I profess to be an expert in the whole sort of startup ecosystem, but certainly from some of the ones that I've spent time either mentoring or have supported through the Institute of Physics, they all report these challenges on the deep tech side, especially of being able to overcome these scaling challenges, right, and getting those products out there. Yeah.
So you mentor startups?
I do, yeah, I do. I do have a few that I've mentored.
I think every startup should have a mentor. We were talking to a young woman who said she got such valuable advice from her mentor that saved the company.
Oh wow! So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if any would report that my advice has directly saved the company.
You don't know that.
I don't know that, right?
So go on. So how does it work? How do you do your mentoring of startups?
Sometimes through networking, mainly. Somebody might say, hey, Jed's done a few of these, go and talk to Jed, or through the work.
So you're available for people in deep
I am,
tech
yeah, I'm available,
them.
certainly for deep tech. I think because I'm a physicist and I look at that, but I think
there might be someone out there who'd be interested in your support.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I'd gladly offer that. In fact, the Institute of Physics has got, a mentorship scheme that, accesses the sort of member networks and enables deep tech or physics-based startups to get this kind of scaling advice. But there's a load of this out in the UK as well. There are a lot of networks and, everything from our kind of catapult centres right through to some of the regional funding and network support that we have in the UK for startups. You can get a lot of advice. The key thing that I tend to offer is how to go from technology to product. So how to think around, because you think of the sort of the anatomy of a tech founder is probably someone PhD, maybe they've spun out of a university or they've, organically come up with a great idea. Founders tend to be hyper focused on that idea, right? Which is great. They've got that singular vision. This is going to be great. This is the technology. We need to invest in researching that. But there's a long way from that thinking to creating a product that someone can realize the value of, invest in and scale and get some return. And I think sometimes that's a hard barrier for some founders to cross, which is why mentors and networking and having a good support system around you of people who've done it before and navigated those challenges is really important.
And you're well placed. You're like the sort of bridge between the science and the commerce, in a sense.
I find myself being in that space at the moment. Yeah. And I think that's
probably very important.
Yeah. I think the transition into, over the last few years, moving into Microsoft and seeing what's happened with AI, spending a lot of time with large enterprises, spending time with startups. I was at a Barclays Eagle Labs event a few months ago, and spoke to a lot of, tech startups there and talked to them about, what challenges they're facing, what's the market like. I think there's been an explosion, right? And so having people close to you who can help you navigate that is essential at this time, because there's so much movement in the especially in the AI market right now.
You said you'd moved relatively recently to Microsoft,
yes,
which I know.
Yeah.
Give us a quick heads up what you were doing before.
Well, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. No, it's a stupid joke. But
you're not going to get away with it. We've got witnesses here.
Yeah.
So, come on, open up.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So yeah, I have a sort of an eclectic journey into Microsoft, and I don't mind talking about this because I think the concept of a squiggly career, I think, is really important these days.
Yeah, there's a book called Squiggly
Career.
There
is, right? Yeah.
And it's very successful.
And so I spent sort of 19, 20 years or so in nuclear defense, before coming into
nuclear defense.
Yeah, that's right.
Atom bombs.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. In and out of that
19
world.
years.
Around about that. 19 almost 2 decades. Yeah.
So that's pretty different to the Microsoft, is it?
It's very different. Yeah, absolutely, completely different. I mean, not many people do sort of almost 2 decades of work and then completely pivot their career into something very different. That's a difficult thing to pull off. I'm quite surprised I managed it, but it was good fun. I always characterize myself, even in the role I'm in now, as a technologist, as a physicist within essentially a senior software sales role. If I'm objective and I look at my skill set and who I am, I approach the world, and the way I think as a physicist sort of approaches the world.
Still, yeah. So the atomic weapons space, we've seen the film Oppenheimer. I mean, you're like one of those people in the white coats doing that. I
used to wear a white coat, but I used to. I
was
did.
hoping you would have done.
So
you're a
used to
real
wear
scientist working.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is, you can't make mistakes in that sort of environment, can you?
Yeah,
to put it mildly.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's quite a different one for the sort of trial and error that we have in startups.
That's a really good point to make. Yeah, because if you think about the world of nuclear weapons and defense, that's a world that absolutely you need to be 100% correct. As you say, it needs to run. You need to have a high process control. You need to make sure that everything is operating as it should. And so, because of that high risk hazard, if you think about the usual mantras of innovation, let's move fast, let's break things, let's be creative, that really doesn't fly in certain industries. And I say it's not just in nuclear defense. One of the key learnings that I've taken into my role now is actually when I work a lot with other regulated industries like finance or the energy sector, where they also have very strict rules and regulations about what they can and can't do with technology, for instance. Those learnings have done me well in how to think about driving innovation in heavily regulated environments. So there are still things you can do though, right? Just because something is locked down, it doesn't mean that you can't build mechanisms for innovation.
Interesting. But you can't test the product.
No, luckily we can't test. Luckily we don't test the product. I think that's probably the best way to say it. Or at least we don't.
So no A/B testing. No.
No, that's right. Yeah, which is probably a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I'm really pleased that there's no A/B testing. But then you mentioned that you pivoted and you modestly said you were quite surprised. I'm not surprised that you'd done successfully in the new role. For someone thinking about pivoting, what should they be reflecting on? I mean, we talk a lot about transferable skills in recruitment.
Yeah.
But what were you thinking about and how did you make it work?
My career was quite an interesting one, being a physicist, working in research and development, then a bit of manufacturing, and then moving to sort of a technical policy and advisory role, to policymakers in government around the sort of nuclear program, and then transitioning into organizational strategy and innovation thinking, working with lots of other organizations on what we just talked about, how to create innovation in a regulated space. And then moving into Microsoft, that change, the reason I looked at that was I could see where the world was going in terms of how prevalent digital technology and AI and how that was changing how businesses were thinking around running their business and driving innovation.
This was before ChatGPT.
Oh yeah, that's before it landed, right? But actually,
but you can see it coming.
Yeah, you can see it coming. And being a bit of a nerd, I'd read these sort of Journal of Computer Science type articles around the nature of what were then sort of generative adversarial networks, or GANs, where that technology was going, transformer technology. This was sort of the 2017 mark. You could sort of see on the horizon, wow, this is different. This is a different technology base, and that's going to evolve and it's going to accelerate and it's going to be really, really important. And it has, right? And it's ultimately led to...
So you wanted to be part of it?
I wanted to be part of it. Yeah, that's basically what happened. And so I realized, what is it that I could offer? And it boiled down really, it was my approach to thinking. And that's, if I think now where we are with AI as well, some of the core skills that, I certainly look for in candidates, or that I was trying to put forward in myself. And, when I made that pivot, was, how do you think about the world? How do you assess information? Can you navigate complex environments and someone's telling you one thing? How do you check that's true? How would you set about, like an experimental thought, right? Experimental thinking. How would I set about testing if you've told me something that's right?
Well, that's what I'm interested. Right? You described your approach to thinking. Yeah, I want to know what that is.
Yeah, it's rooted in the scientific method.
So it's rooted in the scientific.
Yeah.
So you don't believe anyone, you want to go and check it.
Well, that's not. If I
is
did
that unfair?
Yeah, that's not that I don't believe anyone.
But you are always testing.
It's just a mindset. I think something.
Is that the scientific mindset?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. It's one of the wonderful things about why I think people who are STEM professionals or have had a career in science, tech, engineering, mathematics is where STEM. That the scientific method is a wonderful way of framing your thinking for life, because it gives you that rigorous process of essentially critical thinking. And as we move now into an era of AI, where information can be at your fingertips, summarized or synthesized from huge volumes of other information sources, it's the number one skill, right? Of how do I think through this? Is that likely to be the right answer? What might I do? How might I probe and test this? And how do I need to turn that into something useful so I can do something with it?
It does seem particularly important at this point, especially critical thinking with these new emerging technologies.
Yeah, I think it is. I think someone told me recently from LinkedIn, the top 15 skills or so on LinkedIn. I think strategic thinking, adaptability, critical thinking are now up in the top 5, I think, or top 10 of skills that employers are looking for.
So that suggests to me more young people should be doing STEM subjects.
Or they should be thinking around what I call the kind of 4 C's, right? The 4 C's: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity, right? How do you maximize?
Say them again.
Yeah, you're going to collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. The 4 C's. I love the 4 C's, right? So
that's good. I like that too.
Many organizations or many disciplines, I should say, you can leverage the 4 C's, and they're totally transferable. And I think they're really, really, really good skills to maximize on in the era of AI, because now you've got this incredible tool set that's going to be able to reach into data applications, or huge fields of complex data, or massive amounts of documentation, pull all this insight out, and you need to figure out what you're going to do with that. How are you going to make the value of that? What are you going to combine that with to do something useful, right? And that's a skill set. And I think that's where the kind of the job market's going to shift, is employers are going to be looking increasingly for people who can think a little bit bigger picture, and understand how they can leverage these tools to do the more sort of lower end mundane information finding, but actually turn that into value.
How do you learn those skills, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I think they can be taught for sure. You know, there's, like I said, that's why going back to a question about the scientific method, that's one of the things that it sort of gives you.
Studying science.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a lot online now about communication skills. And you can do courses that are very modestly priced.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got lots actually on our courses page on redo.co.uk. So those are things that anyone can go and learn. You don't need to be a physicist, do you?
No, not at all. I just think by you know, I guess I'm lucky, really. I think I never really had a life plan. I just always said, hey, look, I'm really interested in science. I'm going to do that. But over the course of my career, I've discovered that actually a career in physics has stood me in really, really good stead for these sort of adaptable skills that I can apply virtually anywhere, really. And it's essentially, it's thinking. It's sort of teaching you critical thought. Again, philosophy. Actually, I've got a few friends who've got you know, degrees in philosophy, and then the old joke when we were in university about the applied STEM or the arts degree and so on and so forth.
What was the joke?
Oh dear. I always remember there was a maybe I shouldn't say this one on the podcast, but I always remember on the hand dryer in the toilets in the physics department, it was someone had sketched with a pen, the permanent pen, arts degree, pull here, and it was just the kind of paper towel. And obviously for the purposes of listeners, no.
Well, you had a Dyson one for the scientists.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dyson one, exactly. Yeah, please. But I think you know, I don't prescribe to that at all. But it's really,
there's truth in a joke.
Perhaps I was a bit jealous because my course was like 30 odd hours a week, and I'd look at my colleagues in philosophy and doing 3 hours and spending lots of time in the students' union. They did, yeah.
So where are they now, sort of thing? I don't know.
But actually, they're laughing now because if you think about, you know, going back to the 4 C's, right? And you think about this one around critical thinking, it doesn't get much more critical thinking than philosopher, right? Than the kind of philosophy, the sort of art of a philosopher, right? The way they think, the way they approach problems. So when you're looking at AI, some of the people I've seen do really well with prompting, with getting AI to do what they want and using multiple tools, or now agents, as you probably would have heard around, you know, the sort of agentic era. They're coming from more of those communicative disciplines where they're used to structuring an argument.
Yes.
Right? Because AI likes that. If you can structure an argument.
AI likes a philosopher, does it?
It does. AI loves a philosopher.
That's what I studied. I'm pleased to hear there's some hope. So you called it agentic, the agentic age. Tell me, what's that? Is that a Microsoft word? Where's it come from?
I think Satya Nadella coined that one in our yeah, I think he did. He's very good at coining things.
I have the hugest respect for Satya. I come to some of your seminars and he's always so interesting. And I like the fact that he opens up to customers and tells us what he's thinking.
Yeah, he's
come up with agentic.
Yeah, he has, right? I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, and he has a talismanic quality to him. I think he's a fantastic leader who's able to bring that clarity of business and direction, but also really champion the importance of a good corporate culture, an organizational culture that underpins good performance. And I think Satya really embodies that. I think that's why he's been such a successful CEO and why he has such a strong following, right?
Microsoft has turned around really under his leadership, which I find very interesting. So he's written a book, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. Yeah. Hit Refresh.
Hit Refresh.
Yeah.
Well, we should all read that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Mandatory reading for everyone.
Mandatory for you?
Yeah, that's right. When you join Microsoft, you're forced to read it.
Hit Refresh. Okay, well, I'm going to read it because I want to. You've used the phrase agentic, the agentic age. This is sort of stuck in my mind.
So this has been the holy grail, I guess, of AI researchers for decades, which is, can we create a digital system that can take action on our behalf? Given some instruction, then go away and
book your holiday.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, you can do that now, right? So, but can it do sophisticated things for us? Given some basic instructions, and then go away and complete a task and come back. And we're starting to see that now with generative AI, and it's in part because you've got this new.
When you say sophisticated things, what are you thinking?
Well, it might be that it goes into, let's say in a business context, I don't know, ordering a laptop in your business, right? If you break that down, I think many people out there have been in a work environment where the laptop goes wrong, so you go to IT support. And there's probably many, many steps, right, in that process to get that laptop replaced.
It doesn't bode well. You're not thinking this is going to be a good experience, I suppose.
Yeah, sometimes that can happen. Yeah, not at Microsoft, I should add.
Not at Reed either. But so you go to IT support, and so what will happen in this new agentic
So you can imagine, if you think about, we certainly at Microsoft, we see this scale of agents. Okay, so at the one end, you have the sort of retrieval aspect of an agent. So very simply, this agent might know the IT help desk process really, really well. And so it's got all the documentation in there. And so you, the user, say, my laptop's broken, and you'd press enter. And the agent would look at that and assess that and then find out and tell you, just spit back some information. Okay, you need to do the following things. So that would be a very basic sort of query-based agent, right? And it might use your personal circumstance to do that. Maybe say, if you're a director or you work in a field engineer, it might give you a different process. Oh. Then you might go on to sort of a little bit more sophisticated, sort of a task-based agent. So in that same example I gave there, you say, oh, my laptop's broken. So what that agent might do is then not just give you the process, but it might reach out and pull the forms that you need to complete, or it might complete them for you, right? And it might execute a set of tasks based on your context and get you some of the way there so that, you can start to action this problem. And then you might go on to a much more sophisticated or these kind of more autonomous agents where it says, you might put in a prompt to say, oh, my laptop seems to have stopped working. I can't do the following things, and press enter. And then that agent might go, okay, what's the problem here? Looks like there's a problem with the laptop. Maybe I need to look at the laptop procedures. Maybe it calls another agent that goes to the stock or the warehouse, for instance, or the ordering system, orders you a new one, right? Or maybe it triggers a help desk ticket for you or sort of solves that, with you. So it will go and execute, it will assess by itself and execute a number of other tasks.
You're seeing AI do some or all of this already then, are you?
That's right, yeah. Across organizations, one of the key things, going back to what I was saying about that personal productivity and that business value, a lot of organizations now are saying, well, hold on a second. This means that these agents are now really, really closely aligned to our business processes. So what are the business processes that I can get the agents to do so that I can get my human operators really to focus on the more value add parts of the work, right? Because nobody really wants to spend their whole day filling in spreadsheets or doing IT service test tickets,
I hate
right?
doing forms,
yeah, everyone does, right? Nobody wants to fill in forms, but you like interacting with your staff and you like talking and solving people's problems, and they are more inherently human-based activities, whereas the whole filling in the documentation and doing the ordering, well, nobody really wants to do that.
That could be infinite in its application.
Right, which is why I think there's just so much value to what's going on with AI right now. I love this quote, actually. I'm not sure if I can take credit for it because...
Go on.
Yeah, I'm going to take
credit. What is it?
So the being a physicist working in manufacturing, and coming out in my sort of early part of my career, if you're aware of how manufacturing processes work, they have this thing called lean, right? So if you go to any manufacturer and you think they'll have some kind of lean or the kind of Six Sigma, if you're aware of that as well, right? Process optimization, removal of waste, optimizing the factory floor, making sure everything is in the right place at the right time. And this sort of came out of the 90s, really, really
I remember studying it.
Right, exactly.
It was transformational.
It was indeed, yeah. So you think about what lean did to manufacturing in the 1990s. Process, measure your process, put metrics in place, eliminate waste, drive through value, all that good stuff, right? What generative AI and agents are doing, in my view, for the knowledge work is basically what lean did for manufacturing. Right. So if you think about knowledge work and professional services or auditing or tax or legal consultancy, a lot of that work is in the IP of humans. Okay. It's tied up in insights, in tacit information, hard to measure sometimes, in documentations, in advisory, in, complex rules. And we never really had a tool set that could access that before, right? It was difficult. You could do it, but it was difficult. But now with generative AI and its ability to go through a lot of that documentation, to reason with you and you can converse with it, suddenly you can start to put shape around that. You can put metrics around that. And I think the exciting thing for me is AI is going to start doing a degree of lean and process optimization now in knowledge work, in knowledge workers.
That seems to be happening. But I mean, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about manufacturing and how it's changed. Not many people work in manufacturing now. I mean, lean did result in lots of people leaving manufacturing, going in other. Is that something we should be concerned about now in knowledge work? I mean, all these people at home with their laptops doing stuff. And if what you say is correct, that's going to be very disruptive to the labor market, isn't it?
I think it could be disruptive, but I think I know you read in the press around we're looking for headcount reductions and job losses because of AI. I actually think it won't be all that bad. In fact, if anything, I think it will allow us to really humanize work. I think a business that really thinks about this in the right way is able to push the mundane and the not engaging aspects of those knowledge tasks.
Some business leaders, they're probably not the most sort of empathetic. So we're going to go from a 15,000 person organization to 2 or something like that. And you think, well, is that really the best way to motivate your team to embrace these new technologies? Perhaps, perhaps not.
Probably not, right?
No, but so that's odd to me that people would sort of pronounce that. Maybe they're trying to get the share price up or something. I don't know. But then there is this experience that we've all had that with more technology there seems to be more work, not less. Over certainly my career, lots of marvelous innovations. I'm busier than ever and our business is busy. Mm-hmm. So that's our lived experience. But this technology is different, isn't it? Maybe it will be different.
I'd like to think that it will be different because it all goes back to what I was saying about when you give people time back in a work context, what is your expectations of what they do with that time? And this is why it's so important, I think, to do hand in hand the optimization, using AI to optimize people's workflows, but then that time used productively, right, in the right way. So is it opening up new business models? Is it changing the way you operate? Or is it an opportunity to say, excellent, we can give that time back to our employees. No more 14-hour days in some, certainly in some professional services, with long working days and burnout in many sectors. I mean, the legal sector especially suffers from this. I think there's a real opportunity to change the way we think about work. And, my personal hope actually for AI as it diffuses more broadly through the economy is we actually humanize work. Going back to what you were saying around redistributing the workforce, as it were. Very few people's jobs are just one task, right? AI is good at task-based work, absolutely fantastic. But there's still some tasks that it's not ideally suited for. That's what humans are for, right? So what we're really looking at is how do we rejig it so that AI does the tasks that it's really good at and we rehumanize work, right? And I would love to see that, people spending and investing a lot more time in the 4 Cs, building those collaborations, those networks with people, spending more time with customers, spending more time in employee well-being, being able to spend more time perhaps with your children, your family, because you've really implemented AI well and you've been able to strike the balance between a good business model and a work-life balance. For me, that's
that's a really positive message.
That's really where we should be going.
That's exciting. That's game-changing. That's a life-improving offer if we can make it.
Right, that's it.
Come through like that. Now, I'm in recruitment and been in recruitment for a long time. And there's a lot going on in the sort of AI recruitment space. What are you seeing? How do you think it might change recruitment? I'm just being cheeky here, but I want to hear what you think because you're in the sharp end.
It's a good question because I think a lot of organizations in your sector are starting to really think seriously about this technology and what it does. And actually there are probably three broad areas really that it's really having an impact on. The first is the traditional back office processes, invoicing, finance, sort of onboarding, those kind of things, right? Being able to sort of automate and speed up those processes, being able to use much more kind of predictive analytics. And that's really important. Those are the sort of the generic, in fact, they're quite generic, right? Those kind of back office processes.
That was the first place we introduced AI years ago.
Exactly.
Our cash allocation function, I think it was.
Yeah.
It just went through the work like a dose of sorts.
Absolutely right. And those sort of processes now become supercharged. So what's happened now is, one of the things that generative AI is doing in this sort of back office process is allowing people who don't necessarily have the sort of data science or engineering skills to work with, large volumes of organizational data that you would have in sort of your ERP or enterprise tooling. You can now sort of push some of those tasks out to people who don't have that skill set. So you can put AI in between. And so people much closer to the work can ask questions of maybe organizational resourcing or costing or whatever it might be, and get that data, and get that insight from the kind of source of truth, the organizational data, without having to task a separate team and get them to do that analytics for them, right? So that's great, right? Because that's going to just bring those data-driven insights of an organization straight to the people who need them in the front line. For recruitment, I think in particular, one of the things I think it's going to do is really help the consultant in terms of that time for profitability. Because as I understand, there's quite a high turnover in this industry as well. It's a long time to sort of onboard a consultant. They bring their network and the knowledge that they have of their area. And so then you're looking at, your client base, what's in the market right now, what are you trying to match in terms of roles and candidates. And so there's quite a long sort of onboarding process, bringing a new consultant in. And then, of course, if they leave after a matter of months, that's quite a problem. So I think one of the things that the recruitment industry is going to gain from AI is reducing that time to profitability when you're onboarding a new consultant. They'll be able to access training, candidate databases quicker, job spec creation, those kind of things. They'll be able to do a lot of that much, much faster. And then be much, much more effective, much quicker in the organization.
Which would change the economics.
Right. And going back to that business model thing I was talking about, right? So you're changing the personal productivity of the consultant. The role of the business leaders is to think about how that translates into adjusted business models for value, right? And that's the AI strategy bit. And then this final one, I think, is the client engagement, right? The candidate engagement. The piece of anecdote, I know many recruiters lament not being able to go back to all the unsuccessful candidates and tell them, hey, look, really sorry, you didn't make it this time, or these were the things that perhaps would have been good to improve on. Well, AI is a great tool there for providing a much more personalized set of responses or engagement, right? You would be able to sort of create those feedback mechanisms much more readily for the candidates. You might be able to create personalized sort of journeys for candidates so that they can navigate a recruitment process much more smoothly, and have that sort of AI.
Yeah, because
there's
a lot of disappointment involved.
Right.
When you apply for jobs, you don't get them. You go for an interview, you don't hear them.
Yeah.
Or you don't get the job.
And
we want to place everyone, clearly. So
exactly.
Maintaining good relations is very important. You could see AI supporting that.
Yeah, I really could. I think the recruitment industry has actually got there's some real innovation that could be made in this sector, right? If you think,
I agree.
I like to think sort of blue sky. So let's imagine a world where everyone has their own kind of personal AI career tooling, right? So the recruitment industry creates a kind of this competitive world where you're offering to, I pay, I don't know, a subscription a month or something like that. And I get this like personalized AI tooling that's guiding me through my career, advising what's coming up, what should I be thinking about, what skills. I mean, that'd be amazing, right? So there's real opportunity to create these personalized candidate and career experiences based on the knowledge and the experience that recruiters have in the market and job market.
We're seeing people use AI to create their CVs, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And it's used for creating job descriptions. And then the job description goes online and someone applies. You get this situation where sort of AI is talking to AI.
Yeah.
You're smiling.
I am, because I've read a few of these perfect CVs recently where we put out a job spec and the spec, then the candida's replies like,
exactly
that's outstanding CV you created.
Yeah, and the AI thinks, wow, that's the perfect person. I mean, are we kidding here? I mean, maybe the AI is better at choosing people. I don't know, but it's sort of, it's quite easy to game it, isn't it?
Well, this is really interesting. So this is like going back to things that I talk to boards about. This has been kind of the recruitment industry's number one pain point at the moment. In that you have to sort of stay one step ahead of the game in terms of how you're doing candidate pre-selection and what you're looking for now, and be quite creative in that, because
we have a screening business that's really busy.
Yeah,
because more and more people want to have people double check.
Yeah, and I think this is just one of the things that happens when a technology like this hits the market. There are waves of disruption for a little while everyone reconfigures. Okay, how are we going to
update their CV?
Yeah, right. How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to think about that?
CV. But we used to say, I've written a book about CVs, and it was considered fine to tailor your CV. So if you're going for a sales job, you'd emphasize your sales experience.
Yeah, of course.
Or if you're going for an admin job, you'd emphasize your admin. But now I think that people just say, this is the job I'm applying for. Chat. What should I say?
Yeah, that's right.
And it comes back, and it's sort of...
And it's become difficult, right? And I think that's where the innovation needs to come from is, okay, how can you then use the technology to have a much more engaging interview process, right? How do you change the selection interview process with this technology, right? To really, for me, the things that I would be looking for is, how do you find, has this candidate got the 4 C's I'm looking for?
Well, right, you could get AI to check for that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you could.
Maybe you couldn't. Creativity. I don't know.
Right. Well, this is the innovation. I think that the sector's got a huge opportunity to invest and think about. Well, what does that look like? I'm not an expert.
But some people are using it to screen people out as well, aren't they? They use AI to. to sort of assess people on a sort of video interview, ask set questions.
Right.
Looks at you if you're perspiring a bit or your eyes are dilating. No, this is what I'm hearing. I don't know if it's true, but it frightens me that might be happening.
And I've heard similar things
the
too.
sort of randomness and craziness of that.
Yeah.
Doesn't bode well, but you've heard similar things.
I have. And
what do you think about that?
In other industries as well, you hear people saying, well, I could use AI for this, and, I could use AI to, make decisions about whether someone's eligible for this program or not. And then my little internal alarm bell goes off at that point, because one of the things that's exceptionally important when you think about AI is how you approach it from an ethical and responsible point of view. Where will you use AI? Where won't you use AI?
That's where you need your philosopher.
That's right. Well, and that's what you need for an organization. And I think this, going back to...
So how does that work? How do companies address that?
For your listeners, if there's one piece of advice I could give, whether you're an entrepreneur, setting up a business, or you're, an established business, set about creating some form of ethics or governance board for AI, so that you really have this multidisciplinary senior team of people whose role it is to dictate, this is where we're going to use it, and these are the reasons why, and this is where we're not going to use it. These use cases are deemed too sensitive or prohibited in our industry, and we just don't feel comfortable. And then build a degree, a set of principles and a degree of transparency and accountability around that. That is if you're embarking in the world of AI and you're dealing with people's personal and private data, and you're making decisions about the kind of future prospects, you need something like that.
Well, you need to be able to justify a decision, I suppose.
Well, not just that, but I think people will expect now, society will expect organizations to operate with degrees of transparency and trust, and they will need to, certainly at Microsoft, that's something we treat extremely seriously around our, how our 6 AI principles then turn into how we build.
You have 6 AI principles.
Yes, yeah.
It would be helpful just to hear what they are, so just in summary. So if other people are thinking how they want to, ensure, protect, secure their business, what they might consider.
Sure, yeah. So the 6 principles of AI principles at Microsoft, they came from our Ether committee, which is AI ethics in Microsoft, how we think about what's the current state of the art is with AI and how we should think about it. And sort of back in 2017, 2018, when we began this journey, we said, look, if we're going to do this generative AI thing, or if we're going to do AI and we're going to serve these products to the world, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way. So our 6 principles are fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, and transparency and accountability. So those are the 6 principles, and those guide everything we do. Those principles are then translated into operational things that we do at Microsoft to make sure that the products and the services that we build, our software development, how we partner, how we build solutions, we can make sure that we're adhering to those principles in how we want to bring AI to the world.
And they're sort of constant. They haven't changed.
Yes, those principles are constant. I think that's actually a good point. The principles have been constant. How we've operationalized them has shifted and changed in feedback and from our own learnings, and also from the market. So we actually have something called the Responsible AI Standard that we had a first iteration of this in 2019, and where we talked about the principles and AI, and actually the market gave us some very good feedback and saying, look, essentially these are great principles, but they're not very actionable. And so in 2022, we had a second release of the AI standard. And what we did there was go a little bit deeper into those principles. So they break down into a number of goals that sit underneath each of those, and some sort of guidance to help build sort of metrics and guidance for engineering teams to say, well, okay, if I'm looking at fairness and I'm building a system, how can I make sure that I'm aligning to that goal of fairness, right?
I think when there's so much is changing, which it is at the moment, it's good to have some constants. Mm-hmm. It really helps people.
Definitely, yeah.
Anchor to certain key things. Are you saying, just so I understand, that any company that's doing this at any scale should have a sort of policy of that sort with a board or sub-board that oversees this?
I think that's important. I think, obviously depending on what you're doing and what industry you're in, will dictate the level at which you go to. But I think it's very, very important because of the nature of generative AI, and it's how very powerful it is in creating these human-like responses. There's a duty of care that if you're dealing with if you're a B2C company and you're dealing with, you're going out to the mass market, you need to make sure that the people interacting with your product are clear where you're using AI, generative AI.
They should know it's AI.
They should know it's AI. I think that's right. Yeah, we certainly, we make that clear. And also, if you're using the Microsoft products, you'll see occasionally, AI does occasionally make mistakes. Generative AI by its very nature is a probabilistic tool set. So it does occasionally return.
It does make mistakes.
Yeah, people say hallucinate, right? I don't like the term hallucinate. I think people hallucinate. AI makes errors, but it will occasionally make mistakes.
Why does it make mistakes?
Oh my goodness. How long have we got? No,
well,
essentially,
I don't know, I'm interested, but you're all the scientists. Why is it? Because it seems like it.
So when you think about,
it's almost making stuff up.
If we look at the kind of core technology, the transformer-based technology that things like, the GPT, for instance, generative pre-trained transformer, what it really does in its sort of base form is it's kind of predicting the next word in a sentence, pretty much like autocomplete on your phone, but it's doing so on steroids, right? So it's doing that, but it has a great deal of context about that sentence or that paragraph or the prompt or the input that you've put in. So it's just got a lot more context than your standard sort of autocomplete would. But at its heart, what it's doing is it's predicting the likelihood of the next words or the next string in the sentence. Much more innovation's gone on since the sort of first of the transformer technology landed, a couple of years ago. And then now it does quite a lot. It's actually quite complicated in a lot of what we call reasoning at inference time. So that how the models are able to make decisions around that context when you ask it something. But in essence, that's what it's doing. So occasionally when you've got sort of subjects where it doesn't have a huge amount of data on, or, where it perhaps hasn't got that, so let's call it statistical background of information to rely upon, occasionally it will hallucinate, as they say. It will create the next word or next string of words, or it will create references perhaps that aren't true. Now, that's the model in its sort of raw form.
How can you check it then?
Right, exactly. So that's the model in its raw form. What you do, if you think about how you use generative AI in practice, you actually surround those systems with a huge number of safety systems. So other sort of technical measures that you put around the model to check, right? So, groundedness, how well rooted is this response in the kind of the user's query? And you can look at sort of harmful or biased information as well. You can do a lot behind the scenes to make sure that the output of that model is actually pretty consistent and safe and everything. That said, occasionally it does make errors, but you can do quite a lot in the safety systems to cut that down. And that's where a tremendous amount of innovation at Microsoft is spent in doing that.
Yeah. So the cost of AI, it started off pretty expensive, to run these great computer systems. It's coming down, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so
like
where
any
do you
technology.
See that? Yeah, but quite dramatically and quite surprisingly.
Yeah, it's dropping, massively, and I think that's one.
Where does that leave you at Microsoft? Because you've got this huge infrastructure, haven't you, that support?
Yeah, and we're improving that infrastructure sort of every year. Absolutely. In the UK, we've got massive, multi-billion pound investments in building new data centers in the UK to make sure that we're providing the right the sovereign capabilities in the data centers in the UK to serve the UK market. High.
Is that what people want? They want the data center.
Well, it gives you that low latency and performance. You can deploy the models closer where the people are, right? Ultimately, you still have to move electrons over cable, so to provide this capability.
So you have to keep these centers nice and cool.
Yes, absolutely.
So UK is good for that. Yeah.
Well, not as most. Actually,
we could serve the whole world. It could be a new USP.
sadly, no. But
that's a shame.
But you're right. Actually, talking about data center technology, there's a huge amount of innovation in that space. People look at the sustainability of data centers. What I love about what we've done at Microsoft and how we've done that is the type of data centers you'll see will vary depending on their geography, right? So they will make use of the natural environment. In the Nordics, for instance, we've got data centers that use geothermal power, and then they use much more of the natural environment to cool. And obviously that's different in hotter climates where they haven't got that and they need different sort of cooling requirements. And there's a huge amount of innovation in terms of chip cooling and things, and even using AI within the data center to optimize the chip usage as well. So there's a tremendous amount of innovation going into data centers.
So this reduction in cost and the huge infinite number of applications, from what we're hearing, means that the agentic age is truly upon us, doesn't it? It's going to be huge. Yeah. This is going to be huge.
It's going to be massive. Yeah, I think it really is going to
change everything, isn't it?
Well, it'll change a lot of things. I think to a degree where it's very difficult to forecast exactly what.
Impossible, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I
mean, when we started out on the World Wide Web, in the early 90s, no one thought of social media, did they?
No.
So the consequences of that are huge. So there'll be a lot of things that I guess no one's even thought of.
I think that's right. Yeah, and that's like with any, AI is a general purpose technology. What that means is it can be applied in many different industries in many different ways, and some of that's sort of unforeseen. But like many general purpose technologies. It creates new jobs and new roles that nobody had thought of before, right?
So if you're a young person listening to our conversation, how would you advise them to sort of get to grips with AI? What sort of things should they be doing? Because it seems to me pretty obvious. I mean, you left a very good job at the Atomic Weapons Institute to get into AI, pivoted successfully because you could see this is where the action is.
Right.
I mean, I think people listening to this will be doing the same thing. This is where the action's going to be for, I'd have said decades to come, but certainly the next couple of decades. How do you get started? Because this is all new.
Yeah, I think, and it's really interesting because maybe the answer to that a number of years ago would have been, go straight into sort of AI development and code development. So, but actually that might
is different.
That might not necessarily be the answer. Yeah, and it's I'm not saying that we're not going to need coders. By the way, certainly
AI can write good code.
AI can write code, but you still need coders. You still need to know what good looks like. Just a quick aside on that. A friend who's an author, obviously authors getting very worried around AI's capability to sort of write copy and text, but you still need authors, right? You still need people who know what good writing is to make sure that we're still, doing that. That role won't disappear. It will change, but it won't disappear.
Oh no, I'm just writing a book.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But I suppose you've got to have something to say.
Yeah, these things are important. Yeah. I mean, look at what sort of mass manufacture did over the centuries. We still have artisan furniture makers. Right, you can make every piece of furniture with machinery.
Not as many,
right? Not as many. Things change.
Not many wheelwrights.
Yeah, that's right. No, exactly. But a lot of the roles and the jobs will.
Yeah, so that's
going
to. So the will could be a continuation. But I'm thinking, if I want to get started, so I should be using these apps a lot. I should be thinking about how to interrogate them and learning by trying.
Yeah, going back to your question, I got sidetracked. The sort of skills that you really need to think about are how to use the technology, right? So I guess it depends. If you want to go into sort of AI coding, programming, absolutely, those traditional routes are still absolutely right, completely valid. But if you're thinking more around the application of AI, then perhaps it's a bit different, right? And perhaps you need to be thinking more around, well, what do I know about particular industries or problems out there? How do I get more immersed in the capabilities of this technology? So a lot of that will depend on you being much more experiential. So the number one thing that I say to anyone who perhaps hasn't ventured into AI is get hold of some tooling and start playing, because it's the kind of skill set that is learned from experience. You don't sort of sit down and read a manual about generative AI and then get good at using it. You have to use it to get good at using it. And that's because of the nature of the tooling. So if you're looking at, you've got some great business ideas, or you think that you can really disrupt your industry or create new value with this tool, then the best advice is to try and do that. Right, try and spend time playing with the technology, look at maybe some of the solutions that are out there, maybe look to create some new solutions with, again, it's lowered the barrier, right? The skills barrier. That's what it's done, in terms of writing code. I mean, I certainly as a physicist, I wish I had GitHub Copilot, 10, 15 years ago when I was writing some code. I would have killed for it. I wasn't a great coder as it was, but now it would have been so much easier to use the tool to accelerate my learning. So there's all these, it's an amazing learning tool.
People coming into the job market, what tools might you recommend for people who want to teach themselves a few things?
Actually, at the moment, there's just so much out there, that's actually free to access. On Microsoft's own pages, actually, we have something called Microsoft Learn. We've had that for a very, very long time. And actually, what people don't realize is that it's free. You can get a lot of this content learning about, our tools and products, but also more generally about AI products. Additionally, as part of our sort of commitments in the UK and supporting the growth of the UK economy and the diffusion of AI, we had something called the Get On Skills program. We pledged to sort of skill over sort of 1.5 million people in AI skills over the last few years. And I think we've hit our target now, which is amazing. And we're continuing to do that.
But if you want to get on skills, how do you do that? You just go online?
If you go online and look up, exactly, Get On or AI skills learning, you'll see a number of sort of free programs that are out there. There is actually a tremendous amount of free learning on AI out there. Even LinkedIn do some amazing courses as well that are free. There's a really good one for business leaders on, if it's 2 years in, and if you're embarrassed as a senior leader to say, hey, look, I haven't really been paying much attention to this, but there's a great grounding course on LinkedIn specifically for leaders. It's about 4 or 5 hours long. It's a free course. And there's so much great content out there to give you a good starting point for how to think about this technology. And I think that's the key part.
Yeah. So one of our guests said, that AI wasn't going to take your job. but someone who knew how to use it might.
Yeah.
And so it's about learning how to use it.
And I think that's true. Yes. But again, I like to, the way my mind works, I like to think like kind of big picture stuff. And if you look back over time and the diffusion of these general purpose technologies, that's always been true. Whenever the new technology comes along.
So you think of it as a general purpose technology?
It is very much so, yeah.
What are other general purpose technologies?
Well, things
electricity.
Like, electricity, the internet, those kind of things, very general, where you can apply them in many different ways. I think Jeffrey Ding has written a great book on this, actually, the diffusion of general purpose technologies over time. It's a fantastic read. Okay. I always like to do a recommendation, but
that's good. We'll try and get Jeffrey into the studio.
And it's a great read because it talks about this, right? The one thing history can teach us is how these sorts of big technology inflection points affect society and the kind of things we need to do and what we can learn from that, right? And it's the same. Yeah.
Well, it's exciting to be living in this moment, and you've certainly lifted my spirits around all of this, and I think it's the opportunities are vast. So thanks so much for coming in to talk to me today.
Yeah, pleasure.
Really
Thank you so much for having me.
Jed.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask you 2 questions, though.
Okay.
Which I ask all my guests. Well, and the first question is what gets you up on a Monday morning? Because we love Mondays here at Reed. So what gets you up on a Monday morning?
Well, it's normally one of my young children.
That's a good answer.
but no, really.
What time do they get up?
Varying, yeah. Normally before 6 a.m. some of them. But
so they'll be entrepreneurs.
But no, what gets me up on a Monday morning is I feel very privileged to be in the position I'm in now, to be able to work with business leaders and really clever technical leaders from all across the UK, and to be able to help and steer and advise how they navigate AI in their industries, as they're experts in their industry. So that's an amazing privilege, I think, and I want to make the most of that to make sure that I'm adding as much value as I can in helping them do that. So that definitely gets me out of bed in the morning, knowing that a piece of advice or some guidance that I can give can help members of an industry change a business and do some great work. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And the last question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Oh my goodness, this is literally
interesting in this space. Yeah, so.
Well, I think earlier I said, I've never really had a life plan. I've always sort of just gone, oh, that's interesting, I'll do that. I have that kind of a mind. I'm sort of attracted to things I find interesting in the moment. And so never really had a life plan, and sort of looked at things and said, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to be part of that. I don't actually know. I don't know where I'll be in 5 years. I'd like to think that I'll be able to, learn from the experiences I've had now in this sort of career pivot I've had in the last few years, and then move on to something that cashes that in and provides more value somewhere else, and hopefully doing something interesting.
Yeah, I've got a feeling you'll be somewhere interesting in 5 years' time. We might have to invite you back to find out where that is.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's put a date in the calendar.
What the next 5 years?
We'll get AI to organise it.
Thanks very much, Jed. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.